So one of the honors that you have as ASMS president is to choose the Converse lecturer. And I didn't have to think too long about this at all. I've known Steve a long time. He was definitely the most enthusiastic and, dare I say, opinionated ASMS president that we've ever had. And I mean that with the best intention. You're a man of your convictions. You led us superbly. You're incredibly bright. You're dedicated. And this was easy. It's my honor to introduce you to Steve Buckman, the 2018 Converse Lecturer.
Thank you. I'll just start with a couple of little anecdotes first. So I'll try not to speak too fast. For those that know me, I can be a very fast speaker. Part of that is New York, but even in New York, I was a fast speaker. I went to Columbia as an undergraduate. My dad was a news cameraman for the Yankee station in New York, WPIX. So when I went home, he'd usually finish work, come uptown, pick me up, and then we'd start on our journey back to Rockland County. It was about 35 minutes northwest of the city. And usually what would happen is I'd get in the car, and I had a lot of things to say. My daughter just started Michigan, same thing. She's just sort of zipping along, telling me all the news. We would we'd be about 10, 15 minutes into the drive, and my dad would put his hand on my knee and go, "Stephen, take a breath." So it's true. The other thing is this talk's going to have some history in it, and part of that is also with volition. My kids are in school, and they tend to ask me all the time, as we probably all did, "Why do I have to learn this stuff, Dad? I'm never, ever going to use it again." And I wanted to be able to say, no, I actually read some of these tomes when I was an undergraduate, right before we got started, you know, Iliad and the Odyssey and all that sort of stuff. He goes, and I used it for a talk that was in there. So you'll see that it's all part of that. So I want to thank the ASMS for the opportunity to give this 2018 Converse lecture. Even for a guy like me, this is a quite humbling experience as I inventory the list of prior Converse lecturers that included such luminaries as Ralph Millard, Joe McCarthy, Linton Whitaker, Paul Manson, and Ian Jackson. All giants in the field. I can only say that I'm extremely honored and privileged to even be mentioned in any list that they're a part of. The ASMS is a wonderful organization. It's continued to blossom and evolve ever since I held the presidency, and it's gotten even better since then in 2011. The membership is filled with both lifelong friends, many of them are here, and colleagues, and I encourage the young people in the audience to get involved. And perhaps one day you will have the good fortune, too, to be up here speaking to all of us. I specifically want to thank Don Mackay, the current president of ASMS, who's pictured here with his lovely wife, Susan, taken when he visited us in Mackinac Island during the Michigan Academy of Plastic Surgery meeting. If you ever get a chance to go, it's idyllic. It only happens every 2 years, and it's at, Michiganders do this all the time. I'm a New Yorker, but I'm a Michigander too. So it's right at the tip. You have to take a ferry over to it, and there's no cars on the island. It's beautiful. It's all hearse and buggies. And they went up there. I was so pleasantly surprised and honored, Don, by your invitation to be the Converse lecturer, and I'm grateful for both your support and camaraderie throughout the years. It's a distinct pleasure to know you and to call you my friend. John Marquis Converse, for who this lecture was named, was a true pioneer in American plastic surgery. And although I knew of him in the past, I discovered as I researched him for this talk how much he led the way for the many of the archetypes of academic plastic surgery that I hold in so much reverence today. His work in France and in Britain in World War II blazed the trail for the treatment of facial trauma. He founded the Society of Facial Disfigured, a truly orphaned and unfamiliar cause at the time. He also was an esteemed and successful academic plastic surgeon and mentor who founded the Institute of Reconstructive Plastic Surgery as a part of NYU, and by the end of his career, he trained 58 plastic surgery residents. The plastic surgery residencies now are much larger, right? But back then it'd be one or two and then grew, so that he was really a trailblazer in that regard. As so many academic plastic surgeons do, he honored his own mentor, Varstat Kasanjian, in his own way, which was to establish a lectureship in his name at NYU. He invited Kasanjian lecturers that included Paul Tessier, Milt Edgerton, and Michigan's own Reed Dingman, all of who had an influence on me. But perhaps the greatest gift that Dr. Converse gave to me, unbeknownst to him, was training one of my most beloved mentors, Dr. Henry Kawamoto. My own first exposure to Dr. Converse, however, came my intern year when I was at Penn. I was assigned to be the lone intern for Dr. Dick Davis, Nancy Reagan's brother and the son of Loyal Davis, the famous former chair of neurosurgery at Northwestern here in Chicago. He was also the editor of the journal SGO and a founding member of the American Board of Surgery. Dick Davis had a unique carriage practice at Penn. He did almost exclusively back surgery. He wasn't really part of the department, but he sort of had this carve-out. And he would be assigned a lone surgical intern to work for him for a month. He rewarded that intern with a text of their choice at the end of the month. General surgeons usually ask for Sabiston or Shires. I don't even know if they exist anymore, guys, but that's what we used to use. While the ortho interns would sort of be a little bit more greedy, they asked for 3-volume sets of Campbell's. That was big for them. When it came time for me to leave the service, I asked for whatever volume of the 7-volume set of Converse he wanted to give me. It was considered the Bible of plastic surgery at the time, and I thought I would get an early start on my reading. To my surprise and a testament to his generosity, Dr. Dick Davis bought me the entire 7-volume set of Converse, and it still sits proudly in my library today. When we talked about it, you guys all say, you know, have you read McCarthy? But we said, did you read it in Converse? There were so many things that I thought about talking about on this special occasion, but there was one specific subject that I felt most strongly about because it has meant so much to me, and it represents the very best of what I think an academic surgeon should aspire to be, and to a certain extent what we should all aspire to be. Specifically, that subject would be mentorship, and the aspiration would be to try to be a great mentor. So what in the world does that have to do with the title of my talk, and who in the world is Telemachus? Well, as it turns out, the story of Telemachus is amazingly pertinent and indeed seminal. Let me draw on the core of curriculum that I learned as an undergraduate at Columbia to briefly relate the story to you so you can see the relevance to both me, my life, and my role as an academic surgeon, and perhaps even strike a chord in all of you, and potentially help any young, enterprising, craniofacial academic surgeon or any academic surgeon of any light to find a virtual path that might aid in their own career. To find our character, Telemachus, and his relevance to all of us, you must look back to the classic epic poems written by Homer that catalog and recount the earliest stories, myths, and legends of Greek civilization. Those two works are the Iliad and the Odyssey, two of the oldest literary works in existence in Western literature. Herodotus said that Homer lived 400 years before his own time, which would place him at around 850 BC, and the poems themselves manifestly represent the culmination of many centuries of oral storytelling. The two epic poems are set around the 10-year siege of the Trojan War, and Homer uses his works to mention or allude to many of the greatest Greek legends who take part in that siege. To find our character Telemachus, we must look to the Trojan War, which started because of a woman we now know as Helen of Troy, but by all rights was originally known as Helen of Sparta. Helen was known to be the most beautiful woman in all of Greece, and was once described as having the face that launched 1,000 ships. Helen was highly coveted as a wife, and she had many numerous suitors, including King Menelaus of Sparta, the great Greek warrior Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, Ajax the Great, second only to the Greek hero Achilles in strength and bravery, and as many as 45 other powerful men of Greece. To avoid potential conflicts and even war, a plan was made for all the suitors to draw straws, but before that to swear an oath to the winner to defend the chosen husband in any quarrel. The straws were drawn, and King Menelaus won, and so he and Helen were married. It was Odysseus' idea of an oath that resolved the controversy around Helen's suitors harmoniously, and he was rewarded with the promise of Helen's father, Tyndareus, to support him in his courting of Penelope, another one of the fairest maidens in all of Greece. And so it would be that Odysseus would marry Penelope and have a son. His name was Telemachus. Odysseus, Penelope, and their young son Telemachus were quite happy, and the story would end there, if not for the faithful oath that Odysseus had conceived during Helen's marriage. Paris, a young prince from Troy, had visited the palace of Menelaus as an envoy and fell in love with Helen. He seduced her and took her back to keep her within the fortified walls of Troy. This indeed started the Trojan War, and as promised by the suitors, all of them came with their armies to Sparta to help Menelaus destroy Troy and retrieve his wife Helen. This, of course, included Odysseus, who, as it turns out, was one of the main warriors that contrived and executed the famous strategy of the Trojan horse. Unfortunately, this meant Odysseus had to leave his wife and young son to fight a 10-year war. And as it turns out, it would take him an additional 10 years to find his way home. That difficult and tortuous journey home is actually the subject of the second great epic poem by Homer, the Odyssey. It was very difficult for Odysseus to leave his wife and young son, and he worried about his son's ability to grow up knowledgeable and educated in the ways of the world. To address his concerns about his young son, Odysseus asked his old friend, mentor, to look out for young Telemachus, to counsel him, and to watch over him. Therefore, the name mentor has come to mean a faithful and wise advisor. The word mentor, therefore, originates from the Greek poet Homer, who in the epic The Odyssey describes an old friend who guides young Telemachus in making his way through manhood and ultimately in search of his lost father, Odysseus. It seems that over the 20 years that Odysseus had been away, suitors of Penelope started to appear and found that Ithaca was, with no Odysseus, was indeed an isle of beauty, and accordingly they grew fonder and fonder of both Odysseus as well as his estate and his wife. As Telemachus watched the suitors attempt to take his rightful inheritance and his mother, he anguished as his inability to know what to do and how to make things right. The goddess Athena took pity on poor Telemachus and disguised herself as mentor, and together they embarked on a boat to scour the islands of the Mediterranean in search of his father. Athena, cloaked cleverly as mentor, provided guidance to the myopic Telemachus in his struggle to discover his father, his heritage, and his inheritance. With emboldened vigor, Telemachus leaves Ithaca to find his destiny. Mentor recognizes the young man's yearning for his father and his heritage. Perhaps the same can be applied to mentorship, which guides us to understand the inheritance within us and the possibility of achieving our full potential in our chosen profession. A true mentor assists with important transitions and helps decipher the priorities of our lives. When Telemachus was pondering upon the absence of his father, he said, "My father Odysseus is a warrior and a hero, but in this time of crisis, what will I do? What am I?" There was Mentor saying, "Climb aboard, for I will accompany you in this search and guide you." Indeed, Athena as mentor does guide young Telemachus on his road to knowledge, helping him combat temptation and to keep his eye on the prize. Such steadfastness and dedication to purpose results in Telemachus finding his father Odysseus. The reunion is transformative for both father and son, finding themselves by finding each other. They join forces and together smite the suitors, reclaiming the land title and riches that were their birthright. The role of mentors are ubiquitous throughout history. Socrates was a mentor to Plato. Plato, in turn, was both a teacher and a mentor to Aristotle. And Aristotle was the chief mentor to Alexander the Great. Even in fiction, the role of mentors are pervasive, such as the special relationship between Merlin and King Arthur. Or in more contemporary stories, the mentoring relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars saga. One of my favorite quotes on the subject is by Sir Isaac Newton. I know you all know it, who had made the realization that we had a debt of gratitude to pay to those that help guide us and give both the respect and due credit to those that came before us. Quote, "If I could see further than others, it was because I stood on the shoulders of giants." Idly contemplate your life, and you'll find an entire cast of characters and players who are neither playing star roles nor cameo bits. Woven through our days on this planet are a variety of individuals who are not only vital to our development as a person, but who actually play roles that are recursive in nature. I contend that each of us lives the hero's journey, not once, but many times, and that each time we choose wisely, we complete a level. There are some special people with whom we come in contact, share a portion of the ride, that help us on our journey and without whom we would not fulfill our destiny. Many of those special people are our mentors. When you first are growing up, our parents are our main mentors, not only guiding us, but teaching us right from wrong. Grandparents also serve as particularly wonderful mentors. Slightly removed from the everyday aggravation of child rearing, they can provide a loving, detached perspective and often can see both sides of most issues. Grandparents have the wealth of knowledge of having been both a child and a parent, and their counsel can provide a sanctioned refuge from the heat of battle as you're growing up. Although siblings can be mentors, in the younger years they often lack the perspective and objectivity to selflessly give wise instruction. Paul Paparella was one of my first mentors. He was my junior high school principal. His enthusiasm was contagious and his love of the children around him boundless. He loved his job and he made his production of The Wizard of Oz, he loved his job and he made each one of us feel special. As the Scarecrow in his production of The Wizard of Oz, he ignited the thespian in me, and I will admit that I am a thespian. I'm coming out of the closet today to let everyone know. I thought this would be the appropriate place. He could never say no to a child. So all children were welcome, meaning the chorus was gigantic. The productions were nicknamed Paparella and his cast of thousands. Doug Austin was my English teacher in high school. He also was the director of all the high school productions. He took a personal interest in me, inscribing an indelible mark in my formative years as to the admiration and respect I have for teachers and the enormous impact they can potentially have on each and every one of us. I'm still in contact with him to this day. He wisely knew that the need to know that during the turbulent periods of our development, our struggle was important and meaningful, and that in the end, we would encounter fulfillment. It was then on to college and a whole new set of challenges. Charlie Craik, a graduate student at Columbia, was a very important mentor in my life, as he was able to take even the most complex scientific concepts off the shelf and out of the ivory tower and make it real to me. He showed me by example there was no substitute for hard work, but that it also could be fun. He also was quite popular with the women, and so I became even more fascinated and really looked up to him. Again, I was a sophomore in college. He truly shattered my stereotypical notion of the scientific nerd. Charlie had me go to the Columbia Med School, where Wally Gilbert, a Nobel laureate, was giving a lecture. This inspired a small project for me in the lab. It started going so well that Charlie pulled off of his other work to help me concentrate on my project. Ultimately, Wally Gilbert found this work important enough to communicate it as an article in the Proceedings in the National Academy of Sciences. Charlie and I furiously continued this work, which was then published in Nature. But when I told him I was going to med school, Charlie made me promise that if I became a doctor, that it would not leave science and research. He was pretty disappointed in my choice. It was then the mid-'80s, and it was on to med school. Those were cool glasses back then, by the way. And you can see that I was working out a little bit back then, too, so it was a little bit, that's gone away. My parents continued to mentor me every step of the way. So even as you're getting older and older, the parents still continue to play a role. Somehow they globe-trotted wherever I made a move, and they were right behind me the whole time making that move with me. And my mom cried every time the car left after the drop-off. Didn't matter how old I was. Harvey Sugarman was a significant and trusted advisor and mentor to me in med school. He showed me how to be a caring physician and a surgical scientist. He motivated me and set the bar high. It turned out that he was a proud alumnus at Penn, which pretty much was the relationship that I had and probably why I ended up there. With the encouragement of Laser Greenfield, who saw something in me that uniquely merited financial support, among many others vying for it, I was able to work in Dr. Sugarman's laboratory during med school and in the summer. That's a young Bill Kuzan up there, by the way. I was rewarded with an article that was accepted for presentation at the Society of University Surgeons as a med student and a publication in surgery. None of those things would have been even remotely possible without the powerful personal relationship I developed with these mentors. None of these things are done on your own. Dr. Greenfield had Peter Randall from Penn come and give the lab students a lecture, and it was there that I learned about the magic of pediatric plastic surgery and the ability to change a child's life. Dr. Randall loved his job, and he stirred my spirit and personally wrote me to encourage me to pursue my interests. I think there was email back then, but he still never really did any of that. He would personally write you, and there was nothing more exciting than being written by a professor that took that kind of time to write something personal because of a brief interaction that I had with him as a med student. Don't underestimate the influence that some of the older surgeons can have on some of the young people that are in here. They will never forget it. I still have those notes that Peter Randall wrote me. They sit in a file that every once in a while I go back and I look at them. Once I learned that Linton Whitaker was also at Penn with Dr. Randall, pursuing the fledgling field of craniofacial surgery and taking on some of the biggest cases described by Paul Tessier, the father of craniofacial surgery, I knew that's where I had to be. And so it was on to Penn, a general surgery program steeped in tradition and history. Clyde Barker was my department chair. He was the epitome of a triple threat: the highest aspiration of an academic surgeon, a great teacher, an NIH-funded researcher, and an excellent clinician. He taught me by example and held academic surgical tradition on a pedestal for all to aspire to. He himself had great mentors: Jonathan Rhodes, a giant in the field, and I.S. Rabden before him, who was Dr. Rhodes' mentor and was responsible for launching the careers of an inordinate number of young academic surgeons, including C. Everett Koop. Indeed, I did get to move on and work with Linton Whitaker, who trained me as a plastic surgery resident at Penn. He is perhaps the best surgeon I know analyzing a face to discern what the underlying abnormalities were. His honest assessments though sometimes biting, taught me a key to successful outcomes. Dr. Whitaker genuinely taught me the value and the true gift of constructive criticism, and I am better for the fact that he cared enough to share that gift with me. Scott Bartlett was a mentor, closer in age to me at Penn. He was an extraordinarily gifted surgeon who was uniquely able to give away complex cases to me at a very young age. I'm talking about his very young age. It's very difficult for the people that get out there and they just start to be a great teacher and mentor. You're just getting your sort of time with no net where you're operating on your own. But if you're an academic surgeon, it's your responsibility to get those residents involved too. If you yourself have some mild insecurities, and we all do about really tough cases, and you know, for instance, with me, there were no other craniofacial surgeons on staff. I had people that were out there you had to sort of plow through. But it was important to give those residents an opportunity. Scott was uniquely able to do that, even though he was quite young. It's a quality I still wrestle to become better at. He let me run with ideas in the lab and develop my own interests. I found fascination in the study of bone in the lab at Penn, taking the building blocks of the craniofacial surgeon and trying to devise better ways to use and mold them in the lab so we could be more effective at our treatment of our patients. We found that directed pressure or mechanical force could be used to restore facial form. You can see up here, that is, actually when you think about it, it was a little bit at the time. If you had a problem or a malignancy with your eye, a child would lose that, be enucleated, and what would happen is the whole face would be deformed. This was sort of found by many people that went before me, but the question is, what could you do about it? So at the time, we thought it'd be interesting to take a tissue expander and put it into the orbit to act as the functional matrix that would expand that orbit and bring it back to a regular size, and indeed, that's exactly what happened. The concept of molding bone by utilizing force became a focus for me in the lab, one I still study today, and one that can have transformative consequences, both as shown here and now in the clinic, as well as using ingenious devices to accomplish the same things. These discoveries came about just as the revolution of distraction osteogenesis hit the field of craniofacial surgery, and my time and mentors at Penn reinforced my commitment to becoming a surgical scientist. And so I left the blue bloods of Penn feeling well-trained and stronger for all I was taught. This was during the times of Hans and Franz. I don't know if you guys remember that stuff. I flick you to Pluto, you know. Again, working out, you'll find that now I'm just a shadow of all that stuff. And I arrived in Southern California, continuing on my road to knowledge. My parents continued to globetrot as my mentors in a new and strange land. That's what Dr. Kawamoto called it. There I had the privilege to meet and train with one of my most fascinating mentors, the inimitable Dr. Kawamoto. He loved his job, he loved to be a surgeon, and he loved craniofacial surgery. His enthusiasm was contagious, and he infused in me a desire to be like him in so many ways. He worked hard and played hard, and was extraordinarily devoted to his fellows. He treated me like a colleague, and he challenged me constantly. There was little time for sleep, he would say, so catch it while you can, and we caught it with a picture right here. He continues to be a pillar of support and still follows my career closely. And you'll find, just like you look up to your mentors, that your mentors will continue to be proud into following you. They'll continue to watch what you're doing, and they'll feel that they're a part of the same thing. He, of course, was mentored himself by the great Paul Tessier. He both introduced him to me and would let me know that I was second-generation Tessier trained. Dr. K insisted that whatever I would do in life, even if it is teaching, administrative, or research, to always keep doing at least some surgery, as those surgeons around you would always respect you for it and respect what it is that you were doing. It was Dr. K that I think was the most proud upon hearing that I was honored as Clinician of the Year back in Michigan. And so, It was on to Michigan, and indeed the right time for me to take on the role as mentor and teacher myself. But even in the role of a young new attending, there continues to be the need for mentors. That never goes away. Perhaps it is a never-ending journey on the road to knowledge, just like Telemachus. It was a true irony to be honored as the first Haskell Newman Endowed Professor of Plastic Surgery, as Hack, his unique nickname for a surgeon, certainly was my first consigliere at Michigan, a confidant and advisor whose dedication and devotion to Michigan, and in particular the craniofacial program, was unmatched. Hack's affability was something one could only strive to meet. His would be the voice of reason and would gently remind me multiple times about the simplest things that makes one's life move forward. Corinne Marasco is my true partner in craniofacial surgery. We have worked together now for over 25 years as co-surgeons, colleagues, and friends. Her extraordinary perseverance and courage in the face of the many challenges she faces every day as a neurosurgeon with a physical handicap has taught me the limitless potential of boundless optimism. And she helped me to consistently expand the realm of possibility every day. You watch what she's done, first with just a brace, and then to an operative standee, and then to a Sedway, and now to a wheelchair. When we're together doing clinics, any child with a disability, any child that in some way, and any parent that feels that life is lost, not sure what's going to happen, they look at Corinne, who's sitting right next to them, right in front of them, and they realize there are boundless optimism there that anything can happen. I don't have to say a thing. She doesn't either. She's an amazing person to work with, and I've been honored to do so. My partners have all played a key role in guiding me on my road to knowledge. I cannot think of a group that would be better fit. They're all exceedingly bright and have the right stuff. They are at once competitive and supportive. We drive each other towards excellence and yet are proud of each other beyond measure. I believe that we all feel that we are part of something great, something bigger than ourselves. I am honored to serve with them at what I think is one of the best plastic surgery training programs in the country. My mentor in the lab has been Steve Goldstein, the former head of the Orthopedic Research Laboratory, who has facilitated my evolution as a true surgical scientist. Many traditions emphasize this connection between one who has walked the path and one who has just begun. He stressed collaboration and simple understanding of concepts. He encouraged me and challenged me to do science at the highest level and to compete for that recognition at the utmost echelon of peer review. Although Paul Manson never trained me, he read one of my articles about the behavior of bone grafting and sought me out to discuss it. I don't really know why he decided to take an interest in me as a young craniofacial surgeon, but he deliberately took me under his wing and actively promoted my career. He enthusiastically advanced my standing in the main AO organization in Davos, Switzerland, and secured a position for me on their research board. He was an important mentor and a supporter whose friendship I have treasured. A great little story about Paul Manson. What you do when you have these mentors is the first thing you do when you get your job is you want to bring them back. Dad, see how well I've done? You can't wait to do that. So he came, and I gave a talk, and he saw these images that I had. It was a while ago. And back then, they were deciding between PowerPoint. They still would allow you to do PowerPoint or the old carousels. Carousels, guys, are these things that, they have slides in them. You could read, it's like it'll be in the history stuff. So, of course, I'm a bit of a dinosaur and a late adopter, but he actually is the king of late adopters and dinosaurs in that regard. So he had asked me for a copy of a couple of those images, but they were just JPEGs. So he went back, and I knew he only had slides. So I called around and called around and called around to do the opposite of what everybody else was doing. I said, how can I take my JPEG image and make it into a slide? I found this place that said they would do it. I had 5 of them. They said they charged me $20 a piece, $100 to take 5 images and make them into slides. It was Paul Manson. Right. So I went, I paid the $100, and I got it done. I sent them FedEx, and that's it, he got them. Well, it was the next year I went to an ASPS meeting, and he's giving a talk, and on that talk, he's using PowerPoint. And up on the image are my slides. So I go to him and said, Paul, I sent you those slides. Specifically, he says, yeah, they wouldn't let me use them. So I had to actually take these and convert them into JPEGs. Great, but true. Another unexpected mentor and friend that has had a significant impact on me as a craniofacial surgeon and as a man has been Joe Gruss. He is my absolute favorite curmudgeon in the whole wide world. Again, Joe never trained me, but for some reason he got a kick out of me and also took an interest in me as both an individual and in my career. He essentially taught me to play golf, a testament to his true patience. When I would inevitably slice the ball with an overly fast swing, he would see the exasperation on my face and say, "Swing harder, Bucky, swing harder." Joe's counsel and mentorship has made me a better surgeon and a better person. And his friendship is precious and something I have truly cherished. Joe has trained 61 fellows from 1980 to 2017 and has made me an honorary one. I love Joe and pray for his recovery from some challenging health problems, and I hope we can resume our passion for golf and continue to play around the world together. These unexpected mentors in life can be amazingly meaningful and shape one's life in unusual and unforeseen ways. Be open to them as they can enrich your journey through life immeasurably. As a young and new craniofacial surgeon at the University of Michigan, I took the concepts of bone growth that I studied in the laboratory as a resident and took them to the clinic, and found that the ideas spawned when I was a resident had application in the present. You can see there us taking a hemifacial microsomic with the mandible and just regenerating and reconstructing a ramus condylar region. That's the same patient. That wasn't done when I was a resident, not being done. So the same things that we were looking at in Research Council. Joe McCarthy was looking at that right around 1983 when I was presenting this area of expansion. In that small amount of time, we were able to do transformative surgery like that. Is that because of me? No. It's because of a lot of people doing a lot of work. So whenever you go to these meetings and you look at this research, you may not see the difference we're making because we're making it incrementally, like watching a watch. You can't see it change time, but it does. It changed this patient's life. Bone could be grown with volition at the direction of the surgeon. A dream that I had when we were in the lab. Those changes could be transformative in young patients. Bone that was missing could be regenerated and restored. So if you look at the Panorex on top, same thing, but you're seeing it. See that tooth? We take it out. And then even this is a type 3 for those that know the different types. We actually did it in a type 3. You maintain the blood supply to the little nubbin of the mandible, and then we distracted. This was a patient who came from Penn, did not want a rib graft. Her father read how difficult and painful it was to take a rib graft and said, "Isn't there anything else you can do?" And I said, "Well, you know what? It's a type 3. I'm not sure it'll work because I don't know whether or not the distal end of that area that's there, the proximal end, I should say, has enough blood supply." So we did it. This was the first patient I did it on. And you're looking at that Panorex on top. We're talking about 3.5 centimeters of gap. And then what you do is you just wait. You have got that clinic and you wait for the x-rays. And you can see little by little, magically, and it is magical, a mandible appears, a ramus, an ascending ramus appears. And the result could be striking and life-changing. Those are the differences that you remember, certainly, as you move along, especially when you're a young surgeon, especially when you try something brand new and it works, and it won't always work. You'll lick those wounds, but you'll learn from them. The ability to mold and change bone became even more fascinating after seeing its potential in the clinical setting. So I set out to understand it better in the lab. My advice to all those that are out there is, You did research if you did it as a medical student, as an undergraduate. You were usually signing on to somebody else's laboratory. That's great. You're learning how to ask the right questions. The key, if you're going to be an academic researcher, is to find your passion and to ask a good question. By the way, that's all research is. It's really curiosity. It's just questions. Find that question, find your passion, and then ask that question. If you do, and you can relate it to what you do, you will do it with joy, and you'll understand it, and it'll make a difference in your life. I developed an animal model that wasn't easy. They told me at the time it really almost couldn't be done in that regard, and that's why I look at this picture here. That is a rat mandible. So Steve Goldstein, who I told you my mentor in the lab, said you can't really do distraction osteogenesis on a rat mandible. It's too thin, too small. That's a pencil. So just couldn't do it. So what do you do when something is small like that? You either find a Japanese or a German fellow to come in and start playing with like little things to be able to get stuff done. So I did. His name was Caius Radu. He was there, and he actually came in more to see the clinical stuff. And I said, Caius, use all of that German engineering stuff, and you need to go in there, and we got to find a little sort of device that'll actually make that work. So we did that. There's our buddy right there. We've probably done about 1,000 now, and different iterations by every one. By the way, when people tell you that it's the question that's the most important and not necessarily the way that you do it or a device, that's only somewhat true. Remember, as an academic surgeon, you are somewhere in between, especially an academic surgeon, the clinical side of what you do and the researchers, and nobody quite trusts you. The PhDs don't really trust you because you over there do that strange stuff over there and operate. And the people that are truly operating all the time are sitting there going, I don't know what he does when he goes over to the laboratory. But you know because you bridge the two. And that's a really great place to be, as you bridge the two in some way, shape, or form. My advice to you is to know your place. How are you going to do that if you have to go to the operating room every day? Those PhDs sip coffee, and all they do is think about what they're going to do. That's all they do. So how can you compete? Because you have this and you have this. You can compete because you know what it's like to be a surgeon. You know what your patients need. The other thing is we can do surgery. Getting that animal to put that thing on, no PhD can do that. That's tough stuff. The residents come in. Some of the residents are here today. They do that. They had to get good at it. They killed a lot of rats trying to get good at it, I can tell you. They go, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to get this. You will. It's almost like you have to actually go through those rats not making it for somehow and for some reason, you don't know why, but you just get better. Part of it is because you're quicker and doing in that regard. But what my advice to you out there is from that standpoint is Warren Buffett was one of my mentors from the standpoint of investing, and I love it, right? He's a wonderful guy that lives in the same house he ever did in Nebraska. What he said is, what do you invest in? What makes you separate from everyone else? Invest in companies that have a wide moat. That's one of the things he likes to say. So you need to do research in an area with a wide moat, a large barrier to entry. That keeps all the rest of the riffraff away. You find that area, find something that gives you a great barrier to entry, that'll give you a little breathing room. This device and what I did and our ability to get this done was my wide moat. It doesn't ask the great question, but then you have a model, and that model can be used to ask that great question. So I tested my results and used all the technology that science had to offer to learn about bone and mechanical force. Little by little, I was able to accrue preliminary data, and we were able to do that through some of the wonderful things that the PhDs were able to show me in the laboratory that I could then pilfer and use. And little by little, I was able to use my experimental model to elucidate the way in which bone responds to outside stress. So it turns out when we distract, we say double the amount of time and then the bone is healed. It's not. If you look over here, those blue areas are not quite healed yet, right? So you can take it off and maybe it's stiff enough, but it's not all the way, and that's probably why relapse happens. And that was a wonderful thing to be able to see in the laboratory. So finally, I achieved my goal, and in September of 2007, I was awarded my own R01 from the NIH. Subsequently, I received a competing renewal for continued funding, which I now have had for over 10 years. Charlie Craik, my mentor from Columbia, I called him. He was proud. He said, those competing renewals are going to come quicker than you think, Steve, so start writing them up right away. I felt that the lessons and goals that had their origin in training with Clyde Barker were perhaps finally taking root. I still feel those mentors with me today. I still want to make them proud of me. Even more exciting are the more recent discoveries in my lab that have led to the conception, design, and formulation of therapeutic interventions to restore bone healing in places where bone would not otherwise heal. This is a radiated bone on the top, and with the therapies we have, we're able to distract on the bottom. We've gone from a healing rate of 23% in radiated bone all the way up to 93%. And it does it. One of the latest therapies was designed and tested in the lab, was patented after our results demonstrated the ability to restore blood supply with a burst of angiogenesis and bone healing interfaces bereft of adequate blood vessels. At the top, you're looking at what happens with radiation and what happens now with the device that we're able to use, and that's what's healing the bone. These findings are now providing the basis for clinical trials which could help translate my results in the lab back to the bedside to change the way we now care for patients. Such an accomplishment would go well beyond any expectation I had when I started to work in the laboratory. We now have first-in-human data that shows our method, which will work in healing irradiated bone. Here is a young man with maxillary hyperplasia after radiation as a child for a facial tumor. He was an obvious candidate for distraction osteogenesis. However, since this is radiated bone, we would expect this to heal correctly in only 20% of the time. In the lab, as I said, we increased this to 93% of the time. This patient received an earlier version of our therapy which necessitated catheter delivery at the distraction site on both sides daily for 2 weeks. During the first few days, he rolled over in bed and dislodged one catheter on the right, blue arrow, which was both unfortunate but fortuitous, as we now had an internal control. We didn't do it on purpose. Indeed, the site without treatment did not heal well, whereas the treated area had an abundance of healed bone, enough to make his procedure a clinical success. This was published by Derek Wan, who had called me, reading my research to see if his patient might benefit from what we were doing. Now I am discovering a whole new compendium of mentors, even at this stage of my career, that are guiding me and advising me about venture capital, buyouts from strategic companies, and FDA adjudications. Of course, this work is not done alone, and the special relationship I have had with my 35 lab fellows over the years has been particularly rewarding. I hope that I have provided them with at least some modicum of the mentorship that I have received over the years. I hope that I have helped to inspire them so that they might, in the future, inspire others and pay it forward. I have taken my role as a mentor in the lab quite seriously and have been privileged to work with 25 medical students and 1 dental student that have gone on to present at national meetings and become authors in peer-reviewed journals. Unique to Michigan is the opportunity to work with undergraduates in the lab. They have a program called the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program, and I have had the benefit of working with them with over 146 since I have been there. Many of them have gone on to medical school, and I'm still astounded at the number that played a meaningful and lasting role in the work that has allowed my lab to flourish. I've had the great fortune to have trained 71 residents since I've become a faculty member at Michigan. They have been a bright and inquisitive group that are among the best in the country. Some have become private practitioners, some have become academics, and still others have become my partners. But they all have driven me to keep current, to keep innovative, and to question all that I do. I hope I have adequately shown them my passion for patient care and instilled in them the seriousness of purpose and the great responsibility we take on when we care for someone's child. I pray I have provided them with the tools and wise advice that will allow them to become the best surgeons that they can. I have had 8 craniofacial fellows that I have mentored and trained since we started the fellowship at Michigan. I hope to emulate the mentors that coached and advised and counseled me. I plan on a lifelong bond with them, as I have had with Dr. Kawamoto and Dr. Whitaker. In so many ways, the mentor actually learns from the mentees, challenging dogmas and striving for the best way to test and teach. After all, it's the fellows, the residents, and my students in the lab that will make up my legacy as an academic mentor. Finally, there have been probably no greater guides on my road to knowledge than my patients. I truly feel privileged to have had the opportunity to work with them throughout the years. They have taught me humility. They have given me joy. They have brought tears to my eyes. And they have given me the confidence and courage to push the limits of Reconstruction. What a wonderful, blissful, and innocent faith and trust they put in me as I toiled to make the world see on the outside what we all know is the beautiful inside of each of their loving souls. Classically, as I've illustrated in this talk, a mentor is an older and a wiser trusted advisor. I cannot help but think, however, that these children have guided me. Surely the goddess Athena has imbued their spirit to help me become a better surgeon. Surely the essence of these children embodies a hero's journey. And there could be no more special people to share that journey with than the patients I've had the privilege to treat. I have truly lived a charmed life. I'm able to practice my craft at one of the best institutions in the country, working with some of the best and brightest faculty in the nation, teaching some of the best residents in the country, and doing a job that I love. I married Miss Michigan and have become a happy Michigander with 4 gorgeous children. To still be able to celebrate and share honors such as this Converse Lectureship with my parents, Nathan and Lillian Buckman, and my wife Cindy, and my 4 children, Lauren, Brevin, and Allie and Braden, is a gift that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Thank you so much.